Welcome to Yeko Virtual School. This is a geography lesson presented and moderated by Kasadha Yeko. Senior 1 Geography, and we're going to introduce ourselves to geography as a subject that is studied in secondary school from senior 1 up to senior 6. So we introduce ourselves to this subject, and we are going to learn or get to know key words in geography such as environment, human features, human geography, physical features, physical geography. Through all our discussions, we are going to be looking at these key elements of geography. In this chapter, by the end of it, all of you must be able or should be able to know the meaning of geography and the environment. Like I said, this is the subject of geography, and therefore we need to understand what geography is, what the environment is. So our first objective is knowing the meaning of geography and the environment. We shall also be able to realize that geography is the study of relationships between people and the environment, and this environment is both natural and then man-made. We shall be able to identify and classify the features of the environment by going outside our rooms, your sitting room, your classroom, and then we make observations, and the observation we shall make from the surrounding or where we are is what will enable us to identify, understand the meaning of geography, the meaning of environment, and the relationship, the interaction between the environment and the people around that area that you will go out to observe. We shall appreciate that the study of geography helps us to understand how our lives are affected by the environment and how we can preserve the environment so that it remains useful to us. This is how we relate with the environment. After understanding the environment, we shall see how do we as human beings relate with the environment. Then from our relationship, how do we preserve that environment, and how can we ensure that this surrounding, the surrounding of man, remains useful even to the generations that are going to come after our generation. Then we shall appreciate that caring and preserving resources in the local environment, in our community and the country, are all signs of love for one's country. That is what we call patriotism. You cannot be patriotic, you cannot love your country, you cannot love your local environment, you cannot love the environment of your community if you destroy it, if you don't care for it, if you don't preserve resources in that area, such that generation after generation we can be able to keep learning the physical features in our environment. We keep them available and preserved for the generations to come. Now, in Senior 1, we relate our studies to the primary. When you're in P7 primary, you learned a subject called social studies, which consisted of so many disciplines, so many subjects, and they combined all these subjects and called that subject social studies, so that they picked certain things from subjects like geography, subjects like history, subjects like social studies, and other subjects to come up with that subject you call social studies. That is why you are talking about, for example, volcanic mountains and how they are formed, rift valleys and how they are formed. That is geography. Then you talked about people, migrations of the Bantu, migrations of Nilotics, composition of East Africa. That was history. Then those in religious schools, or those that were under the Christian schools, you talked about Christianity or Christian learning. Then those in Muslim schools, you talked about Islam studies. So those were the religious studies, and then others. So it was a combination of so many disciplines or so many subjects which we are going to learn in details. And today we are going to put our emphasis on the subject called geography. In this chapter, in our introduction, we are going to learn the meaning of geography and the importance of studying this subject, which will help you to make proper plans for using your environment and to give guidance to other people about the occupations, about the careers which are related to geography. It is very important that we learn what makes our environment and to understand how whatever is in our environment is important to us. And you've already said we have to understand and appreciate that making good use of the resources within our surrounding is very important, because it will be studied and it will be helpful to people who will come in generation after generation. That is why it is important for us to introduce ourselves to this new subject, to this new discipline which we are calling geography. Therefore, let us explore and understand, what do we understand by the term geography? Or when we talk about geography as a subject, what are we going to come up with? What are we going to find out? So we are going to try and find out what geography is, how important this subject is, and how we can use it to make our lives better in our local communities, to make our lives better in our wider communities, to make our lives better in our country, and to see that whatever we use is useful and meaningful to people who will come up or who come after we have left this world. Our first activity is exploring our environment, and we are going to explore this environment through looking at some of the photographs that were taken from the community, different communities within this country. And these photographs are quite familiar to the environments you are living in, both at home and in schools. In a school, we would go outside the classroom and then explore or look at the different things that make up the school environment. When you're at home, you can equally get out of the house and then you explore the surrounding area in your home, and you'll come up to, or you'll identify some of these environments which I have brought to you in form of pictures. We have photograph A, we have photograph B, we have photograph C, and then photograph D. These are familiar photographs that were taken from our local environments. Some of you come from local environments which are familiar to photograph A. And in photograph A, we have things we're identifying. For example, we have the roads, we have the vegetation, we have a valley, we have hills, we have the cliffs overlooking, or the escarpments overlooking this valley, the slopes, these steep slopes. So this is a local environment to some of you in the places where you come across or you come from. Then in photograph B, we have another environment which could be familiar to your local area, where you have rock outcrops, exposed rocks in the environment or in the area where you come from, with still the trees, the forests, the crops which are being grown in that area. Then in photograph C, we have a large expanse of another environment associated with wild animals, associated with extensive grass, and then the hills or the raised areas which equally have the forests. In photograph C, we have a trading center or a town which has roads, which has buildings, which has vehicles, it has people, what the people use in that environment. Then it has so many of the things that have been put up by man. So by exploring these 4 photographs which you are relating to the environment in your local surrounding, we are going to discover and discuss what we find in our surroundings. And in photograph E, still we see a local environment in our country which may be familiar to some of you, where you come from in their villages, where you go to visit, or where you went to visit one time and you saw this kind of environment. In this environment, or in this photograph, we can see the pointed hills, we can see a stretch of highlands in the background, we can see a winding road which was constructed in this rock environment, we can see buildings, farms, and vehicles climbing this or using this road. And this could be, or this is a representation of a local environment, a community environment, or an environment that is found in a given country, especially Uganda. Then in photograph F, we have still features within this photograph, and this could be a familiar environment to some of you. You could have, or in this photograph, we have an environment consisting of the mountain in the background, we have the forests, then we have the grass which is in the foreground. So by exploring those photographs, we can be able to identify the natural features in those photographs and then the man-made features. For example, we've said that in photograph E, what are the physical features? And when we talk about natural features, we are looking at things which were made by God, things that occurred naturally without the assistance of man or without the activity of man. And in photograph E, we are saying we have the valleys. When you look in between these highlands or these hills, we see there are valleys cutting across the hills or separating the different hills and the different highlands. We have the hills themselves. We have this hill, we have this hill, and then the hills which are running from left to right. Then we have the slopes. On each of these hills we have the slopes going into the valley. So those are natural features. Then we have the physical features, the human features, the man-made features. Man-made, human. They were put in place by people. The examples, we have the road. Another example, we have a car on this road. We have settlements or buildings which have been constructed in the different parts of this natural environment, on top of the hills, on the slopes, and then in the valleys. When you look at photograph F, we have mainly the physical features or the natural features. For example, we have the mountain. For example, we have the trees. These are natural forests. For example, we have the grass. Even in photograph E, we have the forests, or the trees which are growing on the slopes and on the top of these hills. So looking at these photographs, we are going to be able to identify the natural features and then the man-made features. So in our notebooks, I want you to draw a table, and that table has two columns. The first column will have natural features, and the second column will have man-made features. And relating to the photographs above, I want you to identify and write in your books what are the natural features. I've given you a hint, for example, from photograph E and photograph F. What is natural? What is man-made? I want you to do that before looking at what I identified in my table as natural or as man-made. I want you to do that. So from the photographs above, I was able to make up the list below: the natural things or the natural features, and the human or the man-made features. We have the hills. We said the hills are in photograph A. We looked at photograph A. Then we have hills in photograph F. Photograph E, it has so many hills. Those are natural. Then we have forests, which are in photograph A, in photograph B. Then we had forests in photograph C, D, E, and F. There are forests there. Then the valleys, we had valleys in photograph E. We have the valleys here separating the hills. Then we said also in photograph C, we have the valleys where these animals are grazing. This is a valley separating, or the valley which is below this raised area, the hill. Then we said in photograph A, we also have a very broad valley stretching in between these two, or in between the hills. So those are physical features. Then we noted the rivers. The rivers are physical features, and in photograph A, along that valley there is an aspect of a river, or there is a river draining through that valley. Then the land, when you look at photograph C, where the animals are grazing, and where the hills are, where the forests are. All those are found within or on the land. Then we have animals. In photograph C, we looked at the animals. We have the grasslands or the grass in the different photographs, especially photograph C. Then photograph F, we have the grasslands or the grass. We have rocks, and these rocks are mainly in photograph C, photograph B. These are exposed rocks. They could be familiar in your environment. An exposed rock, and then even in photograph A, we have exposed rocks. In this valley, we have exposed rocks along this slope, which were exposed when the road was being constructed. So the rocks are physical, or they are natural features or natural things which we find in our environment. Then we have the mountains, and mountains, we say mountain in photograph F, which is rising above the horizons or above the forests. So this one is a mountain. These are hills. So mountain is higher than the hills. So we have the hills, we have the mountains. So those are some of the natural things or the physical things that we identify in our environment, which are being portrayed using the photographs. But when you get outside your homes or your houses, when you get outside your classrooms, you'll be able to identify at least one of these that we have seen. Then for the human things or the man-made things, from our photographs we see roads. Photograph D, there is a road there. In photograph A, we looked at a road. In photograph C, there is a road. Then there are buildings, especially in photograph B and photograph C. Then there are vehicles, which you have also seen in photograph B and D. Photograph C, photograph D has the vehicles, it has the buildings, it has the electric poles, which you are going to identify. If you look over this hill in this photograph, we have a telephone mast, which is on the hill. Then we have poles. So all these signposts, this is a signpost, those are man-made features or man-made things that we can identify. Then in photograph D, we have the buildings. Photograph E, we have the buildings, we have the roads, okay, which have been, we have a vehicle which is ascending onto this road, and then the settlements, which you're calling the buildings, which have been distributed all over this area. Then we have gardens. These are gardens and compounds which have been set up by people, and they make up the human or the man-made things that we can find in our environment. So from this classification, or from this category, we have identified the things which are in our communities, and all those things, from whichever community you are, all those things are what we refer to as our surrounding. All that is what we refer to as our environment. So if you are told to define what an environment is, we just say environment refers to all the things which are in our surrounding, or all the things that surround us constitute what you call our environment. So this environment can be local, in the smallest village you come from. This environment can be in an area, for example a district, or for example a village, or a country. This environment can be the world. So things that surround us are what we call the environment, and we've seen that these things are in two types. They are the natural things and the man-made things. So when we add the two, the natural things, the man-made things, which are around us, those are what constitute what we call man-made surrounding, or what constitutes what we call the environment where man lives. Therefore, the natural things, as I said, are the physical, or make up what we call the physical environment. Then all things which are made by man constitute or make up what we call the human environment. And we identified things like roads, things like buildings, things like electric poles, things like vehicles. All those constitute what we call the human environment, or the human surrounding. So after identifying and categorizing those features, let us explore and find out how do these things affect human beings. How do the things, the natural things in our environment, how do the man-made things in our environment affect, or of what importance are they? How do we benefit from those things that we have in our different environments? And we are going to explore still different photographs, and then we understand from the physical environment, how does man benefit? From the human environment, how does man benefit? So we have photograph 1, and I want you to identify what do we see. What do you see in this photograph? What do you see? Which physical features do you see in this environment? Which man-made features do you see in this environment? I want you to observe and identify. You can note them down in your notebooks. This is photograph 2. I want you equally to observe. Look at this photograph. Identify what are the physical features. Which physical features do we see in this photograph? Which man-made features do we see in this photograph? It is after identifying those that we shall be able to find out how the environment, how the things which are surrounding us affect us, or how we benefit from the things that surround us. Both the physical, especially the physical, how we benefit from the physical things that are in our environment. Then in photograph 3, I equally want you to observe. This is photograph 3. Make observations. What do you see? Which physical features do we see in here? What is this? Then what are these? Then what are these features here? Which features are these? You can name them, and see, identify them. Photograph 4, I want you to identify which physical features do we see in this photograph, and which man-made features do we see. How do we call these? Are they physical or they are man-made? Then we have these features here. How have we called them? We said these are hills, and in between the hills we have what we call the valleys or the flat land. So there is a valley here, an extensive valley. Then we have the hills running from left to right. Then in between, or along the slopes and in the valley, what has man done? We see structures constructed. We see crops being grown. So we are going to make a relationship between the natural environment and then the man-made activities, or the activities which are carried out by man. So in your notebook, I want you to write down the natural and the human features. in each, or which you have seen in each of the photograph, from photograph 1 to photograph 4. Identify them: human and then natural. 2. I want you to explain how the human activities carried out in each photograph are related to the natural environment. For example, where in photograph 1, where there is land, what has man done because of the presence of the land? In photograph 2, what has man done because of the existence of the rocks? So these are natural things, or this is the physical environment. And then how is man utilizing it? How is man utilizing these rocks? How is man utilizing the land? So I want you to identify and explain how man, explain how the human activities carried out in each photograph are related to the natural environment. For example, why don't we have quarrying or stone quarrying in photograph A? Why aren't we having bricklaying in photograph 2? In photograph 1 we have bricklaying, but it's not in photograph 2. Therefore, why is man making bricks in photograph A and not quarrying or getting stones in photograph A? So make an explanation of how the human activities carried out in each environment are related to the natural environment. Each photograph are related to the natural environment. 3. I want you equally in your notebooks to identify how do the human activities in the photograph affect the environment. How do the human activities in each photograph, how do they affect the environment? In your books, the natural environment. How does bricklaying, which is in photograph A, affect the environment? How does stone quarrying in photograph 2 affect the natural environment? Does the natural environment remain the same? How does animal grazing in photograph 3 affect the natural environment? How does the human activity, agriculture, in photograph 4 affect the natural environment? I want you to identify those 3 aspects in your notebooks and keep making revision. I'll give you just a hint. I've already given you the hints over what we see in question number 2, the task number 2. How are the human activities carried out in each photograph related to the natural environment? Let us just have a sample of just photograph 3 and the photograph 4. What natural environment do we have, or which natural features, things do we have in photograph 3? We have a water body. It could be a lake, it could be a river, but this is a water body. We call it a lake. Then we have grass, we have the trees, and we have the hills, we have the animals. So which human activity is being carried out in this area where there is grass, where there is water? This is livestock rearing, animal rearing. You see the herdsmen taking care of the animals, and these animals are of different categories. We have the cattle, and then we have the goats, we have the sheep. So all this, the human activity here, we call it livestock rearing. It is not cattle rearing, but livestock rearing, because we have different species of livestock. We have the cattle, we have the sheep, we have the goats. So the presence of the water body, the presence of grass has attracted or has led to development of livestock rearing, or has encouraged livestock rearing. Then in photograph 4, because of the relatively flat landscape in the valleys in this area, settlements have been constructed, you can see. Then crops have been grown. So which human activities? We have crop growing, or what we call agriculture. Then we have settlement or construction of houses, because this area is relatively flat. So the relationship, the flat nature of the landscape has attracted development of or construction of settlement structures or buildings. It has also led to or facilitated or enabled growing of crops. Can you identify which crop is this? Write it in your book. So that is how I want you to try to explain for question number 2. Then question number 3 is telling us, or wants us to identify, how do the human activities in our photographs affect the natural environment. And I will make reference to photograph. I will make reference to photograph 1 and photograph 2. Which human activity is this? We are saying it is brick laying. That is the human activity. How does bricklaying affect the environment, the natural environment? Where the soil is dug or dug to make bricks, what do we leave there, or what is left there? They leave there ditches. So the natural environment, or the beauty of the natural environment, is destroyed where the soil for making bricks is dug. Then as bricks are being made, the vegetation around is cleared. What does it mean? It exposes the natural environment to the agents of erosion. So there will be severe erosion, or there will be erosion taking place in this area because it has been exposed. The same will happen to photograph 2. That in order to get the rocks or the stones, what was done to the natural environment? First of all, the vegetation was cleared. This part here was the same level, or the same or similar to this area. But do they still look alike? No. In this area, a very large ditch has been created. It means that after quarrying, this area can never be, or can hardly be used for agriculture. We can grow crops here because there is vegetation, meaning there are some soils which we can use for growing crops. But can we grow crops here? No. Why? Because man has extracted stones, or what we call quarrying, and the land has been destroyed. So that is an effect. So this economic activity, quarrying, is affecting the natural environment by destroying the natural vegetation, by creating large or deep ditches which can never be utilized for agriculture, for settlement. 3, exposing the rocks to the ground or to the surface, making this area less productive in terms of crop cultivation, in terms of settlement, and these areas can be exposed to or can be prone to soil erosion. So those are effects of the human activities onto the natural environment. Now I want you to try to identify the effects of this activity on the natural environment. What can it cause? Then identify in photograph 4, identify what are the effects of crop cultivation, what are the effects of human settlement on the slopes, what effects do they cause on the natural environment. So after exploring that in those photographs, we can therefore note that all that we have noted in each of the photograph is the geography of that area. Whatever we have noted in the photographs from 1 to 4 is the geography, actually from the first set A, B, C, D, E up to F, and then 1 to 4, whatever we have noted in those photographs is what makes up the geography of that area where the photograph was taken. That's why we can say the geography of this area is hilly. Why? Because the surrounding is made up of hills. We can say the geography of this area is mountainous. Why? Because the area is made up of mountains. So that is how we understand and categorize geography, that we're looking at things in the different parts of the country, the different parts of the world. Therefore, after exploring that, let us understand the meaning of geography. Let us try to define and discuss what is geography, or what does geography mean. So from the above photographs and discussions, we can now define geography. The definition of geography can be found in so many, or from so many sources. One, we can search on the net and establish. You can Google, you can actually Google or Yahoo and establish what does the internet, or how does the internet define geography. Then we can go to textbooks. How are textbooks defining geography? All we can rely on the teachers or people. How do people define geography? And I made a simple search on the net, and from the net I visited a site called Wikipedia, wikipedia.org, www.wikipedia.org, and in this site, this is how geography is defined. It defines geography as coming from a Greek term. That geography comes from, the word geography comes from a Greek word which is called geographia. The Greeks, according to the Greeks, geography was referred to as geographia, and from the Greek meaning, geographia means description of the earth. Description of the earth. And what is the earth? The planet where we are living, the environment where we are living. So according to the Greeks, according to this site on the internet, it defines geography as a Greek word geographia, which means describing the earth, or earth is description. The same site goes ahead and defines geography as a field of science referring to the study of lands, features, inhabitants, and all information, all things which are calling phenomena of the earth and the planets, the earth and other planets, because we know earth is a planet, but there are other planets. So according to Wikipedia, geography is a field of science referring to the study of lands. We've already identified in the first photographs which lands do we have. We have valleys, we have mountains, we have hills. Then features, we can equally relate the features. We have hills, we have valleys, we have slopes, we have roads, inhabitants, people, then other phenomena, water and others, which we find on Earth and then on other planets. Then the same site goes ahead and defines geography as a field that seeks to understand the Earth and its human and natural complexities. The field of science which seeks to understand the Earth and its human and natural complexities. We've already identified which human things we find in our environment, which natural things we find in our environment. So as we understand these things, which we are calling human and natural complicities, then we shall be understanding the meaning of geography. Therefore, in simple terms, we can define geography as, in simple terms, because that was internet definition, and we had so many descriptions to the meaning of geography. So I want us to simply define geography as a science that studies the earth as the environment or the home of mankind. Geography is the science that studies the earth as the environment, and what did we say an environment is? The surrounding of man, or a home of mankind, and how man's activities or the man's environment is affected by human activities, such as agriculture, such as fishing, such as quarrying, such as tourism, road construction, and others. So the simple definition which I want you to note down is that geography is the science that studies the earth as the environment or the home of mankind, and how man's environment is affected by human activities such as agriculture, fishing, quarrying, and others. Or we can simply define geography as the scientific study of the earth as a home for mankind. Geography is the scientific study of the earth. From this earth is where we're getting the environment as a home for mankind. So that is how we can define, and I hope you have internalized. I hope when you explore the photographs that I've given you, you can understand the meaning of the word geography. So our discipline of geography will entirely base on understanding the physical aspects of the environment that we have, the human aspects of the environment that we have, and how the two interrelate. How do the human activities relate to the physical features? How do the physical features affect the human or the life of human beings within a given area? That is what we understand, or that is what we are going to keep employing and exploring to understand the actual meaning of geography. Now, from that background, we can now identify the different branches of geography. What makes up geography? And we've already noted that in geography we study two aspects of the environment. We study the natural aspect of the environment, and we study the human environment. And we said an environment, this just or simply means the things which are in our surrounding. So those things constitute what we call the natural environment, and then the human environment. In the natural environment, I've already noted that these are things which naturally occurred or which were created by God. Then the human environment, these are things which have been put in place by human beings or people. Therefore, geography has two branches, and these branches are: one, the human geography, and this one is mainly concerned with cultures, the culture of people. That in some areas we have nomads, in other areas we have hunters, in other areas, so those are cultural aspects. Then we have economies. So the human geography is concerned with the cultures, the economies, these are activities which man is doing in the different areas. For example, we have an agriculture economy. People engage in crop cultivation. People engage in livestock rearing. We have an industrial economy. People engage in setting up of industries. We have a tourist economy. that people are concentrating on: tourism, then interaction with the environment. So the cultures, the economies, the interactions, how people deal with the physical environment is what we call human geography. So human geography, the first branch, deals with the cultures of people, the economies of people, the interactions, how people differently interact with the environment. Then 2, the second branch is the physical environment. And this physical geography is concerned with the study of the processes and patterns of the natural environment. For example, we look at the atmosphere, the space above the earth in our environment, that is the atmosphere. 2, the hydrosphere. Hydrosphere, that is the water. So the water bodies around us. Some of you are near swamps, some are near ponds, some are near rivers, others are near lakes. Some of you live on the shores of the lakes, some are on the coast or along the coast near the shores of oceans and seas. So all those water bodies constitute what we call the hydrosphere. Then the biosphere, this is vegetation, the forests, the grass and others. Then lithosphere, this implies the land on the earth's surface. So the physical geography learns to understand or studies to understand the processes, especially that made or led to formation of all these features in the atmosphere, in the water bodies, in the vegetation or the forests, and then on land. And then how the patterns, how do we find in the different areas of our local environment. What do we find in the atmosphere? In some places are sunny sometimes, others are cloudy. All those aspects, we find them in the atmosphere. Some places are rainy, in some areas they are windy. All those aspects, we define them in, or we look at them in the atmosphere. Then hydrosphere, I said water, the vegetation, and then the land. So physical geography is concerned with understanding the atmosphere surrounding us, the hydrosphere surrounding us, the biosphere surrounding man, and then the rhizosphere. The areas we study under physical geography include the earth and its landforms. For example, the hills, which we've already identified, the plateaus, the mountains, valleys. Then weather and climate, I've already told you, and the aspect of the environment called the atmosphere, that is where we identify or we study weather and the climate. That's why we say it is rainy. So the weather condition is rainy. Yes, it's rainy, that is a condition. Then the weather element is rain. The climatic element is rain. Then weather condition is hot. The element is temperature. The weather condition is cold. It is temperature, the weather element. So we study about that, and we shall be looking at this when we're describing the physical part of our environment called the atmosphere. That is where we shall look at this. In this first one, this is the lithosphere. So on land, that is where we shall identify which features do we find on land. Then we say hills. How are they formed? We describe how they are formed. Mountains, valleys, and others. Then we describe we study vegetation. And I've told you vegetation lies or constitutes what we call the biosphere, the part of the physical environment called the biosphere. Then the drainage, those are water bodies constituting the hydrosphere. We look at the soils, the lithosphere. Then we have rocks, part of the rhizosphere, and others. So in the physical geography, we shall concentrate, or we shall explore more and understand how these all describe how some of these were formed, what importance are they to man, how can they be recorded? For example, the weather and climate, and how do they affect the human activities? Let us continue exploring the nature of geography. We have already defined geography. We've already identified the branches of geography. Now let us continue exploring the nature of geography, and we shall still make reference to a number of photographs. And we said geography, we are interacting. It's an interaction of the physical and the human. So in these photographs, we are going to look at interactions between nature or natural geography, and then of physical geography and human geography. So we have photograph number 5, photograph 6, photograph 7, and photograph 8. And from those 4 photographs, I want you to, in your notebooks, to identify which photograph we can study under human geography, and which photograph we can study, or which activity we can study under physical geography. For example, in photograph 7, which activity is taking place? Is it physical? Is it human? In photograph 8, what do we observe in photograph 8? Can we study photograph 8 in physical geography or human geography? So in your notebook, after looking at those 4 photographs, I want you to copy and fill this table. Copy and fill this table, and we are looking at the branches of geography and what we can study under those branches of geography. So copy this table in your notebook and identify from the photographs what can we study under physical geography. Then what can we study under human geography? For example, as I said, from photograph 7, what can we study? Which observations do we make? Which activity is this? In photograph 8, I'll give you an example of photograph 8. In photograph 8, which features do we see? We have the slopes, or we have the hills. Then in between, there is a deep valley. Then within the valley, there is a river creating a waterfall. So from this, we can study physical geography, and we say, or we study the formation of these steep slopes, the formation of the valley in between the steep slopes, and then the formation of the water body, or the formation of the waterfall. So we can put that under studying physical geography. So you will note here, under physical geography, formation of hills, formation of waterfalls, formation of valleys. So that is physical geography. Then from photograph 7, what do we what can we study under human geography? We identify those activities. So I want you to copy and fill the table to show which branch of geography studies each of these things. So fill them here. Physical geography, formation of waterfalls. Human geography, lumbering or agriculture, and others. Then I want you to think of other things which may be studied in each branch of geography. Do we only study about fishing, like in photograph number 5? Do we study about only mountains in physical geography, forests in physical geography? Do we study about only waterfalls, like in photograph 8? Do we study about can we only study about the activity in photograph number 7? No. So I want you to think about other things and include them in your table, in your notebook. Include other things that we can study in each branch of geography: the physical geography and then the human geography, making reference to the surrounding where you are found. So that is the meaning of geography. That is the wider exploring of the meaning of geography, an interaction between the physical environment and the human environment. A scientific study that looks at or is concerned with the earth as a home for mankind. A home, you know what a home, where man lives. Let us look at the value of studying geography. Of what importance is geography to you as a student? Is what importance is geography to your father, to your mother, to the people in your community? What is the value of studying geography? And in this activity, we are going to relate geography, which you are saying the physical geography, the human geography, to our own lives, to understand how are our lives affected by what is in our environment, the physical things and the human things. Therefore, in studying geography, studying geography has so many benefits to us, to our communities, to our country. And these include that when we study geography, we learn to appreciate nature. When you go and visit a mountain, when you go and visit a forest, when you go and visit a lake, you appreciate the beauty of nature. That is the first importance. And you can only appreciate this nature through the discipline of geography. That's when you can be able to know the mountains, how they were formed, the hills, the valleys, the forests, and their importance. So the discipline of geography helps us to appreciate nature. 2. Geography explains the formation of physical features. For example, how were lakes formed? How were mountains formed? How were valleys formed? The formation of these physical features is explained through the discipline of geography. 3. Geography helps us to understand how man utilizes his environment. From the photographs you've seen, where there are rocks, how does man benefit from the rocks? Where there is land and relatively flat areas, how does man utilize that? Where there are forests, how does man utilize the forests? Where there are water bodies like lakes, we've seen so many photographs. How does man utilize those lakes or make use of the lakes? In one photograph we saw man is catching fish, or people are catching fish from the lakes. Then there are boats. People are using the lakes for transport. So we can understand that man, or how man can utilize his environment in the areas where he is found. Then geography helps us to understand how man has managed to live in the different environments. For example, how does man live in deserts? For example, how does man live, or how does man manage to live in the hilly areas, the rugged mountainous areas? When you're looking at photograph E, how did man, or how has man survived, or how managed to survive in that environment which is hilly with very steep slopes, with very deep valleys? How did he manage to construct the road? Then in photograph A, the first photograph, how has man managed to live in that environment? Look at the way man constructed the road on the slopes of those steep slopes of those steep hills. So through geography we can understand how man has managed to live in the different environments. There are so many environments. Some environments are deserts, Other environments are mountainous, other environments are flat, other environments are in valleys, other environments are forested. So how does man survive? How does man manage those different environments? Then geography helps us to make wise use of our environment and conserve it for the future, because we looked at the effects. Where the rocks are quarried, you cannot replace them. So what do? Where trees are cut down, unless you make wise use of the forests, you cannot conserve those forests for the future. Where the lakes are, if you don't conserve the lakes, then you cannot find them or use them in the future. So through geography, we are able to make wise use of our environment and conserving it for the future. Then through studying geography, we acquire skills, and these skills can be in map reading, in interpretation of photographs, and the statistical data. We've already looked at how we can interpret photographs. That you look at a photograph and know, in this photograph we have these features, human and man-made. In this photograph we can know which activity. Where you see people holding fish, then we say that is fishing. Where you see people seated on canoes or in boats, then we can say that is water transport. Where we have roads or people, where we have maybe people living in the towns, then we say that is urbanization. So interpreting photographs, that is a skill you can acquire after studying geography. If you don't study geography, then you may not be able to interpret a photo. You may look at a photo and think, oh, this is a road. You can't see it as a road, but maybe a river, because it is winding onto the slopes of. So we interpret photographs after studying geography. We interpret statistics, data given in form of numbers, after looking at geography. We can be able to read a map after studying geography. Then geography is a career subject that when you study it, you acquire a wide range of employment opportunities. There are so many jobs which are related to the discipline of geography, to the subject of geography. Because, for example, we have urban planners. An urban planner must have an aspect of geography to know what can be constructed where, to know how can we manage the drainage of an area. Surveyors, pilots, meteorologists, these are people working in or dealing with the recording, the measurement of weather and the climatic elements. So you cannot study meteorology, or you cannot become a meteorologist if you don't have an aspect of geography, or if you did not study the aspect of geography which will tell you weather and climate. Where do we find them, or which aspects do we find under weather and climate? If you don't have that, then it will be hard for you to become a meteorologist. And because of those different employment opportunities, we have a group of people. So when you study geography, you can become one of these people who need to study geography. The first category of people are the pilots and sailors. Pilots and sailors. Why is geography important? It helps them to understand how to locate places, and you can do this after understanding map reading, after understanding how you read a compass. You cannot fly a plane and take the right direction if you cannot read the compass. So pilots, sailors require geography because it helps them to locate places. Meteorologists, these ones, require geography because it helps them to record and measure the weather elements. Teachers, in order to prepare their students for exams and earn a living. That's why I'm instructing you. That's why I'm moderating this topic to you, or I'm moderating this subject because I studied geography, I became a geography teacher, and I'm preparing you for exams, and equally I'm earning a living out of teaching geography. Then geologists, these are people who deal with the rocks, who learn about rocks, who understand their composition, and who make understand the uses of each rock. What do we find in the rocks, and how can we use, or for what use are those rocks? For example, there are rocks which are used as hardcore. Not every rock is used as hardcore. There are rocks which are used for making tarmac. Not every rock is used for making tarmac. Then, so those ones who identify the composition of the rocks, who study about rocks, their composition and uses, we call them geologists. Then farmers. A farmer needs geography. Why? All the farming activities, or most of the farming activities or agriculture activities, depend on the physical aspect of geography, weather and the climate. So he has to understand, or they have to understand, weather, climatic elements, and how they affect the agricultural activities. When to plant, when to weed, when to harvest, which crops to grow in which area. That's why not all farmers in all places grow the same crops. No. Farmers in areas that receive heavy rainfall have specific crops they grow. For example, bananas or matoke. Then those in drier areas with low and unreliable rainfall, some of them resort to rearing animals which do not require a lot of rainfall or a lot of water. Or they go for crops that can resist the drought or the dry conditions, like cassava, like sorghum, like millet. So those of you come from areas where millet is grown, where sorghum is grown, it's not because you don't want bananas, but because your natural environment, your climatic elements, especially the rainfall, do not or does not permit you growing the bananas. Okay? And understanding, or if you want to grow the bananas where the rainfall is insufficient, then according to a farmer, you have to understand that I have to use other geographical measures. For example, supplying water artificially. And in geography, we call that irrigation farming. Then students or learners, for you require geography because you need to prepare and pass exams and later become employed, or you earn a living later. So those are the importances, that is the value of geography to you who is listening to me, to you who is going to study this geography, and to me who is instructing you, and to everybody in our country, that we need to study this geography. We need to understand the geography because it is an important discipline that relates the physical environment, the human activities, and how we can relate with one another, how the two branches can relate with each other and have continuity, and don't face the numerous problems that may come out of misuse. Let us see how the environment affects us. How do we, or how does the physical environment affect man? You are probably aware that most of the things we do in the places where we live depends mainly on the environment where we live. I've already said that those who live in drier areas may decide or are forced to use irrigation farming because that is what the environment dictates. Those who live in dry areas sometimes engage in nomadic pastoralism, moving from one place to another with their animals. Why? Because that is what the environment dictates. So we are going to understand this better by looking at the different the different way through which we get affected by the environment. So how do we use the environment around our homes? How do we use the environment around our homes? From the different photographs, we've seen that where we have land, where you have soils, we grow crops. Where we have rocks, we do quarrying in order to get materials for building, materials for construction. Where we have lakes and rivers, people cut out fishing to get food. Where people live around forests, what do? They cut out lumbering, charcoal burning, wood collection or collecting wood for timber, for fuel in their homes. Then the domestic animals are grazed on natural vegetation or grass. So where there is grass, there is animal grazing. It could be grazing of domestic animals, it could be grazing of wild animals. Explore, make reference to the photographs we've already given from the first part. Then the homes, industries, towns, cities are constructed where there is land. So the land helps us to construct our homes. The land helps us to construct industries. The land helps us to construct cities and others. So that is how we make use of the environment. That is how the environment affects us. That we depend on the physical environment to develop the human activities or to carry out the human activities. As an assignment or as a task, you can think of other areas or other places you know or you have read about and write down how the environment or what things they do in their environment. Maybe you know that place, maybe you've ever visited that place, or you've ever read about that place. Add additions of notes of where or what people do in those environments or how the environment has affected them. Then, because we are saying geography is the relationship between physical and human, after positively benefiting from the environment, we're going to explore and see how do the human activities affect the natural environment. So effects of the activities on the local environment, the natural environment. And we are going to explore this through looking at a number of or some photographs. We have photograph number 8. Number 9, can you observe which human activity is being done in this photograph and what effect is it having on what part of the physical environment? We can see an activity, we can see some aspects of products from this activity. And where are they going? Are they going to the atmosphere? Are they going to the water? So, photograph number 9, economic activity, the effect on the part of the environment. Photograph number 10, which economic activity? We can see a healer place, and then people decided to do a given economic activity. And what has it resulted onto the environment? What has it created onto this natural environment? Then photograph number 11, because of the different economic activities, what problems can we identify in this area? Especially when you look at this ground, what do we see here? Then which economic which problem is this? So then in photograph number 12, this was also an area which was affected by the human activities of farming, forestry, and which effect, or what effect do we see in this photograph. So by observing those photographs, we can identify the different negative effects, some of them, and we shall base these effects on this question: how do the activities you carry out affect the environment in your area? How do the activities you carry out affect the environment in your area? Most of the human activities affect the natural environment negatively. Then the natural environment in most cases affects the human activities positively. That where there are rocks, we carry out quarrying. Where there is fertile land, we carry out agriculture. Where there is water, we carry out fishing, or we carry out irrigation. So the physical environment in most cases affects the human activities positively, while the human activities in most cases affect the natural environment negatively. So these are some of the effects. 1. Overfishing may lead to depletion of fish species in the water bodies. That is a human activity, fishing. But when it is done excessively, the effect is negative, depletion of fish, and fish species are an aspect of the natural environment. 2. Where we have industrialization, where we have urbanization, it leads to environmental pollution. Look at photograph number 8. Photograph number 9. The human activity, industrialization, urbanization. These are industries in an urban center. What is the effect? We have air pollution. This is smoke, industrial smoke, or these are industrial fumes being emitted into the atmosphere. This is lumbering, forestry, cutting down of trees, deforestation. What has it caused? Disappearance of the trees that used to be, or the forests that used to be on the slopes of these mountains. So all of them have been cleared. So that's why we're saying human activity negatively impacting the environment. The physical environment positively, because where there were trees, which activity was influenced? Lumbering. Then, so where there is industrialization, where there is urbanization, there is environmental pollution, and this is caused by dumping of human and industrial wastes, either into the atmosphere, into the water bodies, onto the land and vegetation. Then where we have overcropping, where we have monoculture, that activity or that crop growing mainly leads to soil exhaustion and lowering of soil productivity. Deforestation, like we've seen in photograph number 10, leads to loss of vegetation cover, and that results into severe soil erosion. Quarrying, as we saw in one of the photographs, results into creation of pits, ditches, or hollows, which are breeding grounds for disease vectors like mosquitoes. Then overgrazing, as we saw in one of the photographs, leads to, or due to overstocking in nomadic pastoral areas, causes soil erosion and loss of natural vegetation. Swamp reclamation, due to urbanization and settlement, leads to flooding and destruction of biodiversity. You can make reference to photograph number 11. So photograph number 11, this is an urban center, and because of urbanization, what happened? The swamps were drained, and there is a saying that water passes where it has ever flowed. That is one of the proverbs in one of the communities in Uganda, or one of the tribes in Uganda. So water passes where it has ever, or flows where it has ever flowed. So when the swamps are blocked, when the swamps are covered by sand or soil, water will keep coming back because it knows it has ever flowed there. So this flooding is an effect of swamp reclamation because people wanted to construct the houses or the buildings. Then constructing the roads, they blocked the water channels, and water looks for where it used to pass. So that's why you have a problem of flooding. This is a problem of landslide. You see chunks of land sliding from the higher areas to the low areas. Effect of human activities like agriculture, like forestry or deforestation. And this is one of the problems we are facing in Uganda, especially in the mountainous areas like Bududa and Mbale. So those are some of the effects of the human activities on the physical environment. Look for other effects. Create or come up with other effects that you've ever seen, that you have ever read about, and write them down. Then I want you in your books to write a plan for caring and conserving the natural environment in your home areas, so that it remains useful to you and the people who are going to come up or to come and live in the areas where you're living. In simple terms, what solutions can we have? For example, to conserve the environment against flooding. For example, to conserve the environment against deforestation. For example, to conserve and protect the environment to avoid landslides. In your notebooks, write down the plan, or write down the steps, or write down the solutions you can take in order to care, in order to conserve the natural environment. So that has been chapter number 1, and in this chapter, this is what we summarize, or this is a summary of what we have been able to study under chapter 1. We have studied that geography deals with studying how man relates to, or man relates with his physical environment, or man relates with the environment, which is said is human and the physical. 2, we have also learned that the environment is made up of all the physical and man-made features, all the physical and the built features, or the man-made features around us. 3, we have studied that, or we have explored and understood that the geography has 2 branches: physical geography, which deals with the physical features or natural features, and human geography, which deals with the human features or the man-made features. So that is then we've also understood, or we have learned that studying geography benefits you as a human being or as an individual, benefits the community, the area where you're living, and benefits the country. And if you don't study geography, then you as an individual will negatively affect the environment, the community will negatively be affected, and the country will equally be negatively affected. Then we've also learned that most of the things we do, including the economic activities we carry out, are mainly influenced by the natural environment. That where you have farmers or crop cultivators, those are normally areas which receive heavy rainfall and have fertile soils. Where you have urban centers or industries, that is where maybe the raw materials are found, areas which have relatively flat landscape. Where you have animal rearing, they are mainly areas with extensive grassland where grazing takes place. So most of the things we do are mainly influenced by the natural environment. We have also understood, or we have also learned, that our activities, the activities we do, agriculture, fishing, lumbering, can affect the environment negatively. And I've told you, most of the activities man does affect the natural environment negatively. Then the setup of the natural environment normally affects human activities positively, because they determine what man does in a given area. Then we have equally established that we need to use our environment wisely so that it remains useful to us as individuals, to us as communities, to us as the country, and the world at large. Thank you so much for listening, and I encourage you to continue establishing, searching for more information on the internet, more images. You can search for more images on the internet on the natural features, on the human features, about the human activities being carried out in the different areas, because in our discussion today we've only looked at agriculture, some photos on agriculture, some photos on fishing, some photos on forestry or lumbering, but you can search for more photos or more images on the different activities, human activities, which are carried out by man in the different environments. Thank you so much for listening.